If you spent any time playing Baldur's Gate 3, you're probably aware of the fact that a short while ago, a huge patch dropped that was replete with lots of heinous, evil endings that add a lot to a properly evil playthrough. You're probably also aware of the fact that in addition to that, Larian introduced for the first time official mod support. Now, many of us, myself included, have been using mods since the early days of early access. So I've always used mods, and I use an external mod manager to make this happen. But the external Baldur's Gate 3 mod manager requires a little bit of effort, a little bit of work. It's not too complicated. But what Larian has introduced is the ability to just point and click on mods within their internal mod manager, and like magic, it installs for you, which is a pretty big achievement in and of itself. If you played any of their games, specifically Divinity Original Sin 2, that game has tons of mods and it adds a lot to the longevity and the quality of the game. Modding in general does this very well with all single-player games, of course. And so a lot of people for the first time are enjoying mods properly because A, after many playthroughs, they want to try out a modded game, and B, with the internal tools that Larian has introduced, it's very easy to mod the game. These are all good things, but it's not that interesting in and of itself. Because they made it very clear when they talked about the types of things that you could do with the game in terms of modding, it would be limited to the things we've seen thus far. Different races and classes, different weapons, different appearances, different spells, etc., etc. Basically things that affect the internal mechanics of the game and gameplay. Now there's some variation here. There's a well-known mod that has emerged in recent months that is essentially like a roguelike for Baldur's Gate 3, but it still is essentially playing with the mechanics of the game. And Larian made it clear originally that beyond these basic, in air quotes, because these aren't that basic, but these basic types of mods that include class, race, weapons, etc., that would be all you can do, because modding the game completely would be very difficult. Now it's important to remind you that Divinity Original Sin 2 has a Game Master, a Dungeon Master function, that allows you to create your own campaigns in that game from scratch and do whatever you want. So basically, you can create your own games there. The same has been historically true for games such as Neverwinter Nights, RPGs that have received a huge amount of longevity and fun through the ability to create your own campaigns. But Larian originally said that was off the table due to the nature and the structure of the game, just not possible. Well, I have news for you, very important news, and I'm about to tell you that might not be true at all. About a week ago, a small unassuming mod, so it seemed, was released on the Nexus, called BG3 Toolkit Unlocked. What does this mod do with only 118 endorsements and not a ton of downloads in contrast to so many other mods? Well, it basically allows you to edit the game completely. Level editing, save editing, and much more. This means that this mod allows you, at least potentially, to do the same things you've done historically for games such as Divinity Original Sin 2, meaning sometime down the line, when people have understood this better, you'll be able to create entirely new campaigns within the Forgotten Realms for Baldur's Gate 3, including adding your own assets, voice lines, dialogue, basically creating your own adventures. And although, of course, mods that give you new classes and new races and new spells and new gear are fantastic, they're the basic structure of modding, mods that allow you to create entirely new campaigns and adventures are on a whole other level. All the stuff I've talked about thus far is purely factual. But I want to warn you now that the things I'm about to talk about now are not factual in the same sense of the things that I've just talked about before. Well, the interesting thing about the BG3 Toolkit Unlocked mod is that it offers you the power to do basically anything in the game you want, theoretically. But how is this accessed? It turns out that internally, in order to access this toolkit, it came down to just flipping a couple of simple values around. Something that is very simple, very accessible, and something that most people with a little bit of working knowledge of internal game structure can do very easily. If you've ever modded any game before, you'll have often encountered something like this. You'll have something like 1 equals true, 0 equals false, and then you can swap out the values, and it's very simple and very powerful. Okay, we're still factual here. This is not yet speculative. The speculation comes in, though, when you wonder why the most powerful modding tool possible for Baldur's Gate 3 consisted of a very simple structure that, with a little bit of poking and prodding, was fairly easily accessible to a layperson. Basically, at the end of the day, it was quite simple to unlock this toolkit that allows you to essentially do everything with the game, including, as I mentioned, create campaigns, and just basically make your own private games. But the question that arises from this, the speculative question, is, why was this so easily accessible? We were told in the beginning that given the complexities of the game, in contrast to Divinity Original Sin 2, for example, that this type of complex modding simply wouldn't have been possible. And yet, it turns out that it is. Now, coincidentally, it happens to be the case that on Larian's official Discord server, you're not allowed to talk about the BG3 Toolkit Unlocked mod. Could be a pure coincidence, but I don't think it is. I think that this toolkit is in fact a secret gift to us made by Sven and Larian, and an official FU to Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. I'm hypothesizing now that the reason why there were originally these so-called limitations, i.e. limited mods that don't necessarily affect campaign or the entirety of the game, was because an order, or rather a restriction, came from on high, i.e. from Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro, that this sort of thing should not be possible, because of course they wanted to milk Baldur's Gate 3 for all they could possibly milk it for, which would include DLC and expansions. But if you have the option to make your own campaigns and fundamentally make the games you want within the universe of Baldur's Gate 3, say in the Forgotten Realms, New Adventures, whatever, that makes such DLCs and expansions, official ones, made in theory by Larian in service to Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, that much less appealing. And so it seems to me that probably Sven and company did in fact in the beginning have this plan that eventually a fully game-altering toolkit ought to be accessible and unlocked, but Hasbro told them not to. The fact that of all the mods, you're not allowed to talk about this one mod on Larian's official server is also suspect, as I mentioned, and lends credence to the idea that, in reality, Larian always wanted to do this, but they weren't quote-unquote allowed to. But now that we know for many months that they've officially moved on from Baldur's Gate 3, apart from patches and little things like that, and they're already working on their 2 next games, they don't care anymore about what Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast has to say. And again, by dint of the fact that it's relatively simple to access and discover, I'm making the claim that they secretly always wanted to do this. This is kind of a secret weapon, as it were, to be wielded by players against the evil Corpos, so to speak. Can I prove this definitively? No. But I do think the evidence lies in my favor, and I think in time we'll probably discover more about how this came to pass. But for now, mum is the word. Larian has not officially said anything about this, apart from it not being allowed to be talked about on their official Discord server, and we'll just have to wait and see. The most important thing about this, obviously, is the potential to create entirely new games within the Baldur's Gate 3 engine. I'm hoping we get some serious modders over a long period of time who want to create new adventures, specifically in the Forgotten Realms, and I'm really looking forward to it. Anyway, do let me know what you think. Do you think my theory is correct, totally incorrect, maybe correct? Let me know in the comment section. And as always, if you like my takes and my content, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. It'd be much appreciated, it helps out the channel, and I'll check you out next time. Take care.